Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching another one of my Louisiana legislature interviews here on my show, William Wallace for America. With me today is Representative Mandy Landry. Representative Landry, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm glad we made it work.
Absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, I know how hard you're working for your district. I watch on social media, and I love the fact that you're very passionate about your not only your district and your beliefs, but you work really hard for them. And I think that's going to show in your legislation. And I wanted to share that with everybody. So, what are you most excited about? Session starts in 2 weeks. What are you most
Less than
excited
that.
about?
Yeah, less than that. It's an election year too, so I think it's going to be an exciting session. But I have several bills that I love for very different reasons. The first one I filed would give voters the option to create a ballot initiative process in Louisiana. In a short summary, I've gotten a lot of questions about this, but in about half the states, voters have the opportunity to put an issue on the ballot directly. And what it means is they have to gather, a certain amount, thousands of signatures in a certain amount of time. And then it goes on the next election. And we don't have that in Louisiana. And it is one of the questions I receive the most from people because I think that our state, we have this crazy populist streak, a little bit of a
Yeah.
crazy streak. I think there's things that the people who live here want that maybe are not reflected in their government representatives.
I actually really like that idea.
Hmm.
That's because it's a way to give power back to people.
Yes, yes,
I think
power
it's
to
I
the
think it's
people.
amazing.
Give
That's
the power
amazing.
back just a little bit.
Yeah, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, the average person can't really travel to Baton Rouge all the time
Right.
and lobby during the session, and money talks up there. It's just true.
And
So
and the other thing too is that a lot of times you get like you said, when you say money talks and people don't have the time, there's a lot of groups that would probably be really good at filing legislation, but legislators, but a lot of people don't realize you get limited on the number of bills that you can file, like
mhm,
in this session where you can only file 5.
right,
And we don't realize how quickly that number runs out. But
right.
I like that. Power back to the
Yeah.
people.
And there's issues that deserve a statewide discussion, like minimum wage. That
Mhm.
should be really discussed in every nook and cranny. And I think most people would be in favor of it, but maybe not. And instead, the bill just dies in House Labor Committee every single year for however many years. Let people talk about it.
Right.
Recreational marijuana would pass in a heartbeat. And people
Yeah.
ask me that all the time. Why don't we have it? We're losing out on so much money.
Yeah.
And it's because of political reasons.
And Richard Nelson tried to
Hmm.
get that last session.
Yeah, and there's going to
Yeah.
be a few
And
more
and
bills
it's
this
a
session. Yeah,
what's that?
there's going to be a few more bills on it this session, and it's just such a moneymaker. Richard told me once, he's not a fan of taxes, and he said it's the one tax that people are begging to pay. And I think that's a good way of describing it. People want to pay that
Yeah.
tax.
That's a real unique way to put it, that they're begging to
Mhm.
pay. It's almost like a casino tax.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, people go to the casino and they're paying a voluntary tax.
they were
And
voluntarily throwing their money on the table.
exactly right. It might another way to raise some money for the state.
Yeah.
So what other legislation do you have coming up? Now, do you have your 5? Because you're
Yeah.
limited to 5 non-fiscal, but as many fiscal as you want, correct?
Right. I think all maybe just four of mine have posted yet. I actually have a marijuana related bill, medical marijuana. So last year we were able to pass some employment protections for some people who have a medical marijuana referral. This is the first time we passed anything like this. I was able to pass it. And it's just kind of shocking that people can have a legal medical marijuana referral, but still potentially lose their job.
S So is
So
that still a thing that people could lose their job for having that referral?
well, up until last year, there were no protections. So if their employer tested them, or if they tested them in order to apply for the job and they tested positive, they potentially couldn't get the job, even though they had that, it's not a prescription, it's called a referral. So we passed protections last year for state employees. So basically, anyone outside of law enforcement, if they test positive and they have a medical marijuana referral from the state,
Mm.
they will not automatically lose their job. Of course, if someone shows up to work high as a kite and unable to function, then they definitely are under scrutiny. But think about it: alcohol is legal, but I still can't show
Right.
up to work drunk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think there'll ever be like some sort of a testing kit that tests if you've had marijuana in the last couple hours like they do for alcohol? Because that could be a big game changer for the industry too.
So you have hit the nail on the little tiny head that's at the center of all this. Whoever comes up with that test will become a trillionaire
Yeah.
overnight. There is no test for it now, and that's kind of the problem. Is you can't tell if someone ingested it 2 weeks before. You can't tell if it was legal medical or something they bought on the street. We're not there yet, but the industry is struggling. They really have to come up with a test soon.
Yeah, because that could be a complete game like you said, an instant trillionaire, you
Instant.
know.
Instant. Because then people wouldn't have to worry about what they do in their off time. They only have to think about it right before, or however many hours before they go into work, just like alcohol.
It's interesting when you look at the history of when cannabis was made illegal, and now we're finding out all the benefits that there are
Mhm.
for people with medical conditions, and in the industry, just the hemp industry alone, is great for agriculture, it's proven that growing
Mhm.
hemp actually puts nutrients back into the soil, and there's lots of other things that it can be used for. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be a lot of discussion coming up. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, it's terrible. What happened with marijuana way back 40s, 50s, and 60s was just plain racism. It was, tapes and documents have been revealed that it was seen as a very easy way to put a lot of our black residents in jail, and that's what happened. And there wasn't any research done on it to determine effects like opioids, and
Mhm.
we missed out on half a century, like you said, of medical use, and also how many people did we imprison, untold amount that we took out of society. So hopefully we can start to correct.
Yeah, I definitely think that we're at a point in our country where we need to unwind some of the injustices that have been done in some different areas, and I
Mhm.
think that there's a lot of I think that that sometimes that's been used to over criminalize people,
Yeah, yeah,
and
because it's easy.
yeah. So what other legislation do you have coming up? Yeah, that's 3 bills so far.
That's three. Well, no, that's two. So last year I filed the first employment protections for medical marijuana patients. This year we're trying to expand it. And the idea we have, I had a task force that worked all year. The idea we had is that it would be treated the same as if you had an opioid prescription.
Mhm.
So opioids are very dangerous and
Right.
very addictive, but some people have a need for them. And so if you have a prescription and you take a drug test or similar, and you have opioids in your system, as long as you have a prescription, they can't hold the test against you. They have to also test to see if you were stoned or struggling at work. And so
Right.
the bill would treat a medical marijuana referral the same as an opioid prescription. So it's creative.
Yeah.
So that one, the ballot initiative. Um, Shoot, I'm forgetting some of them. Oh, one is the same I brought up last year that I think it's important, surrounding abortion and pregnancy. So, medically, if someone shows up to an emergency room, so I have to give the background. If you show up to an emergency room, and whether you've had an abortion or did something to harm yourself to have an abortion, or if you're having a miscarriage,
Mhm.
it looks the same to the ER doctor. You can't
Okay.
tell what happened. What we've seen around the country for years now, and has, I think, has picked up since Roe was overturned, is in a lot of places people don't understand, for example, that the crime is on the doctor and not on the woman, and so they're arresting the person who's going through a miscarriage or hemorrhaging. And
Hmm.
I know this sounds like a niche kind of situation, but we know since before Roe this happened that women are always going to try to end a pregnancy, and it's not going to go well if they're trying on their own. And so we want to make sure that if they show up for emergency care, that they won't be criminally charged in any way. And it is important.
I think it can be very important.
Yeah.
A lot of times, there's people that don't agree with some of these issues.
Hmm.
That a lot of times, it's important, and this is why I appreciate how passionate you are about the things that you believe in,
Hmm.
because the discussion needs to be had.
Yeah.
And that's what I want more people to understand, that even if they don't agree with somebody's issue or legislation, the discussion needs to be had, because maybe if this legislation is not the answer, this legislation doesn't get through, the discussion being had might open the doors to help other women.
Yeah.
And I think that we've spent so much time through the years fighting about whose freedom is actually right, instead of fighting on solutions that make a difference in women's lives. And I think that's very important to approach it in that way.
Yeah, it's, maternal health issues are very important, but also just to recognize one of my overarching points with reproductive issues is we don't know what's going on with someone. Like, I
Correct.
never know what's going on with someone's body, their life, their partner, anything. And this is kind of a prime example of we don't know if they are miscarrying a wanted pregnancy. We don't know if they took something they bought on the internet and it's dangerous. We don't know. So we want to make sure everyone feels safe enough to go to the hospital.
Like I said, it's like you said, it's niche, but when you look at how much it happens here, then you multiply that,
Right,
times what happens in
right.
the country, the discussion being had here may lay the groundwork for a bigger state that can save more women's lives and health.
Yeah.
And you're right. I'm glad you brought that up, about we never know what's going on in a woman's life. And when you again have the discussion and you make this more of an open discussion where you're talking about it more, now we can find ways to help other women make the right decision for
Mhm.
themselves and be able to take care of their health, because we don't know what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, we
And
don't.
they might be a victim, and of some sort, and are can't say it because they're afraid of being harmed. So not to try to
Yeah.
give any examples, but I think
Mhm.
it's important.
Yeah, there's a lot of women who seek out, who want to terminate a pregnancy. There's some sort of abuse factor involved.
Right.
So you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I'm glad we're having this talk and talking about it a little bit more there. So you have a fourth one, and then you have a fifth one that you haven't filed yet.
Ballot initiative, pregnancy, marijuana. Um, one is I wouldn't say it's a local bill, but it's coming from a constituent business and will affect small business in the state. So I have a lot of breweries in my district and in New
Oh,
Orleans.
wow.
Yeah, they are legitimate small
Oh,
businesses.
absolutely.
It's one little brewery. They figured out, it's a bunch of dudes who wanted to make beer. I don't know. There's a lot in the state. There's probably like 40 to 50 by now in the state, and they're all over the place. And I don't know all the ones, but I know the guys in New Orleans, they pay good wages.
Yeah.
Most of them offer health insurance. Yeah, just as background that they're good businesses. But um, unfortunately, I think they're the only business. Alcohol is the only business. This is again very technical, but it affects my local businesses.
Absolutely. That's what you're very passionate about helping your
Yeah,
district. I
yeah.
love it.
This is my local
Yeah.
guys. Right now, if there is a violation of a license at a brewery or a bar or something like that, ATC shuts them down immediately pending the litigation. And so what ends up happening is a lot of places go out of business because they can't afford
Right.
the loss or they can't afford a lawyer. And so we're literally just, sorry, this way. We're literally changing it this little to say the ATC commissioner can decide if the business should be shut down or not.
Yeah.
And this seems like a weird thing to a lot of us, but given the number of breweries and bars, it is something I hope I can get through because the brewery business, it has grown in baby steps and it's
Right.
really a good industry. And we want to try to help them grow a little bit. So.
Well, it's something that is a building block of our community,
Mhm.
and take alcohol out of the equation, they're a small business.
They
These
are,
are
yeah.
these are people that are contributing to the local economy, and
Mhm.
paying tax dollars to the state. And I like the fact that you've recognized and you've listened. First off, and you've recognized the fact that, and I get what you're saying, that there's some little law, somebody makes some report, or maybe something happens and they get shut down. And then, when your law right
Mhm.
there is kind of like a stopgap measure, it says, hey, wait a minute,
Yeah.
they can operate while this is going on because we can't shut them down, you
Yeah,
know?
because there's confusion
Right,
sometimes. I mean, everyone sees a bar closing as, oh, they were serving 15-year-olds. There's a million reasons why they
right,
might shut down. And especially the breweries or some of those places, a lot of the laws are new about what you can do in your business. So there's often a lot of confusion. And maybe the confusion is true that
right,
there's a violation there, or maybe there's not. And maybe someone who's in competition with them,
right.
for
Yeah,
instance,
exactly right. Exactly right.
turn them in. So this is a governing law. It's not politicking. It's trying to govern um, the businesses and people who live here.
One of the things I like about what you're doing there, and if I'm being too wordy, just let me know. But I'm spotting some real positive things about that. I've said often in my show that bureaucracies and bureaucratic agencies are able to create a lot of laws within themselves that circumvent our Constitution.
Mhm.
And not only people, but businesses are losing a lot of their freedoms as a result because some agency makes a law or makes a regulation or a policy or a procedure that a business, like you said, might not even know they're violating. And what you're doing is you're creating actual legislation that can override an agency that might have created a procedure that could actually close a business, and you're doing something that gives that business or those individuals their rights back.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think it's a very positive. I think it's a very positive thing.
Yeah. I mean, look, like I like government.
Yeah,
Government protects a lot of us, and
right, exactly.
I like that we have agencies that can deal with narrow issues because I can't deal with every
Right,
issue. The governor can't. But there's a lot of overstepping of
right.
boundaries, of course, and sometimes just the intent gets lost in the
Right.
shuffle. Sometimes, so I'm hoping to help these guys out. I would never know anything about this issue if they hadn't come to me early on. I mean, I've known a lot of them since before I ever ran. So it's a constituent issue and it's a
Yeah.
business issue, and I'm glad I can help them. Hopefully,
I love it. What about can you talk about the one you haven't filed yet?
the fifth one, oh, I released it, so it should be showing up soon. It's for the city as a whole. So we have blight in the city, and some of it is just the house down the street is blighted. But something that the city has had an increasing problem with in recent years is what they refer to as criminal blight. So that is generally large apartment complexes that are have people in them living in squalor, or huge commercial
Mhm.
properties that are uninhabitable. And what happens, because of state law, the fines are really low.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're really low, and the state won't raise them. I've tried, others have tried. So what happens is these people just drag out the owners, they're slumlords,
Right.
um, drag out the adjudication. This is another legal issue. They drag it out forever. And once they go through several steps, they just pay a few thousand in fines. So this
Yes.
tries to raise the fines, it doubles them. And if they essentially violate the judge's order and don't repair it, I think 3 times, it becomes a felony.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it's very interesting for me to carry this because I don't think I've ever voted in favor of a new crime. But seeing, I
I
know,
love
but it's really,
Yeah,
some of these people, their tenants are living worse than dogs, and it's
yeah.
it's horrible, and
I
they
is
don't
this
do anything.
is this anything to do with what we see on the news, recently? They have some apartment complexes in New Orleans East
Yep,
that,
yep,
yeah,
yep,
okay.
yep.
Yeah,
Those,
I understand.
it's been going on for a long time, but I think that situation and others like it has increasingly caused problems to the city because it's so many people, and they just won't do anything.
Right,
They won't do it because they know they're like, oh, I have to pay a few $1,000s in six
right.
months.
I've made that in 1 month or whatever
Yeah,
the case may
yeah,
be. And
big
and and
deal.
and it
So
and it really disproportionately hurts lower income people. And so, you know
it's all lower income
yeah,
people who can't. who can't go anywhere else
Right.
because it's difficult to find affordable housing. So they might have a $500, $600 a month apartment, and they know if they leave, they can't find anywhere else. And they know if they complain too much,
Mhm.
they'll get evicted. And I've been doing tenants' rights bills every year I've been there and have gotten very little through. I only got one bill passed. But this one it's really unconscionable how they treat these people, and it only would hurt the bad apples
Right.
like we talk about.
And what's interesting is, while although you can be for business rights as well as personal rights, many of these businesses or many of these landowners, they're benefiting oftentimes from tax structures, or they're benefiting from regulations, that protect them, but there's nothing protecting the rights of the individuals that are living there. So,
Yeah,
you look,
we have very weak tenant protections in Louisiana, which I was surprised to see because I went to law school in Washington, D.C., and a lot of your major national cities have, have fairly strong tenant protection laws, maybe too strong, according
right,
to some people, just because the massive amount of
right,
people, and no city wants a slum in its
right.
city if they can avoid it.
Blight
And
is bad for the city, yeah,
a slum is bad for everyone.
yeah.
And we don't have those protections in Louisiana. And the state so far has not really allowed New Orleans to expand on our protections here. So I'm hoping, the presentation we make can show the committee that it's a true problem, and it's only going after the worst apples, the moldy,
Yeah.
crusty, make you sick.
The apples with the worms in them.
Or the owner is a worm
Yeah,
sometimes.
I love it, yeah. And look, and while I can certainly see what you said, there's be some people that are against it, and I'm sure it's a fine line to find, to be able to run this legislation down this fine line,
Mhm.
that separates the good, the ones that are being really, truly, genuinely bad apples, and then the ones that might just, have gotten complacent. Let's say, a little bit of credit.
Mhm.
There's a fine line there. It goes back to what we said earlier. It's about the discussion needs to be had,
Yeah.
and when you bring this out, maybe there might be some amendments that, clarify it more in some ways, but the discussion needs to be had to help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's just someone who's become complacent or absent, then after the first set of fines or the first adjudication with a judge, then theoretically that person, now they're on alert. They're not
Yeah.
absent in another state anymore. So they're going to start working towards making things better. And that would be the idea.
Well,
So,
I'm loving your legislation so far. It sounds like
you
you put a lot
know,
of hard work into it.
I've gotten pretty good at this
Yeah.
legislator thing, and I mean, it's true. Every year, we all learn a little more about what will be accepted,
Yeah.
and the work you have to do ahead of time. And I always wish I could have done more work on the front end, but only so many hours in a day.
Well, like you said, yeah, it's carefully thought. This is a fiscal session.
Mhm.
A couple more questions here before we round it up, close it out. But this is a fiscal session, and there's a lot of talk about trying to find ways to reduce taxes, get rid of state tax, get rid of income tax. A lot of exciting things coming up. Is there anything else that you'd like to see come out of this session?
Fiscally related or in
Yeah,
general?
fiscal related, or even the next question was what you're most passionate about. So this will be about fiscal issues, but the next one about what you're most passionate about.
I mean, fiscally in general, I would love to see raising the minimum wage and,
Mhm.
raising other wages and, reducing tax burden on the lowest, third or lower half, increasing tax burden on corporations. I'm sure you've talked with a lot of members about ITEP, the
Yeah,
industrial exemption, and we give away the farm with that. I mean, there are Republicans who hate that because
mhm,
it takes money away from localities. So I would, if we see tax reform, I would like to see that kind of reform for sure. It's election year, so I know some of my colleagues are going to want to cut taxes, cut income
yeah.
taxes, and it's just going to kick the can down the road if we do that. So I hope we can restrain ourselves on
Yeah.
some of those issues.
No, it's interesting. Like I said, when it comes to either minimum wage or lowering taxes, the part that I always try to bring up is that whether you agree or disagree with either one, the discussions need to be had. I know it sounds redundant. I've kind of said this a couple times, but the problem is that I think that everybody takes one issue and they try to untie it from all the other issues. And as a result, one thing gets passed or it gets taken down, and
Mhm.
something, and then the other combinations of things don't happen simultaneously, so the whole plan falls apart. And then
Right.
the next session, everybody's pointing fingers at each other. And so, while I agree or disagree, don't or I either agree or don't disagree with some of the things, that they're planning on doing, I think that the lack of planning is what's happening. And
Yeah, and it's hard to pass a big package because you have
yeah,
144 people and all the people and advocates behind them, and it's hard to pass a package, and also hard to pass something that you might not see the results quickly, like education. There are a lot of things we know we could do to start now that we won't see results for 20 years or 15
yeah,
years. We just won't. Like, we're not going to see a change in
right.
college students until the little ones can read.
Oh, yeah,
So,
exactly right.
and it's hard to pass things like that with people who aren't going to be around,
Right.
aren't going to be in the legislature then. So that's tough governing for sure.
But you know what this is, what good planning is? It's kind of like that old saying where they say you don't plant a tree because you're gonna sit under be the one sitting under the shade. You plant a tree because your children and grandchildren will be sitting in the
Mhm.
shade of that tree. It's kind of like that's the same as legislation.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily pass legislation because you're gonna see the immediate results of it. You pass it because the future of Louisiana depends upon it.
Yeah.
And
That's what we
yeah,
should be doing, but
mm,
everyone's looking at the next election, and voters now expect quicker turnaround on things because, media for whatever reasons, and you really have to show you did something versus that you are someone, and
right,
that's good and bad. I mean, we don't want people to just sit up there and do nothing. But it's also important to have people, like, I ask a lot of questions. I do research on a lot of bills. I talk to people to amend bills. I'm busy in committee, and people who do all those things are very valuable, but you can't put a number on that.
right.
It's not this is not a game, but a lot of
Yeah.
people act like it is.
Well, that's why I say even if I agree or if whether I disagree with some of the legislation that people have and stuff, I still I like as my show to watch what they're passionate about, what you're working hard on,
Mhm.
and see the fact that you have a good hard work ethic, and that whether I agree with the legislation or not, to know that you're working hard at the problem or
Mhm.
the issue shows that it's calling attention on it, and
Yeah.
that in itself calls for solutions. And I think when that process happens and we start respecting each other's work ethic, maybe we can come together on idea and find the idea that we can all agree on. You know,
Yeah.
uh, I was talking about freedoms and liberties in America, like I always like to talk. I think that freedoms in America are under attack. And I always ask my national interviews about freedom in America, but in Louisiana, how do you think freedom is under attack in Louisiana, or can you tie that to how it's also under attack in America?
Um, I think they're combined. I think Louisiana is usually a microcosm of some of these national issues. So, I mean, first, a lot of us have different definitions of freedom. And kind of what I think is that my freedom stops at where it starts to affect your life. So, if
Okay.
I want to walk around my house in a sequin costume every day, doesn't affect you remotely at all. But let's say I'm on the bus and I have a huge sequin hat and it keeps hitting people and knocking them over and bruising them. That's a problem because now my freedom to dress how I want is starting to harm you.
Okay.
And so I think what we're seeing a lot is, like, for example, some of the anti-trans legislation or anti-LGBT that's been going on for a long time. Things in that area, a lot of people don't agree with it, or their religion does not approve of it.
Mhm.
And so they're saying that's infringing on their freedom, but it's not, because if whoever I marry has nothing to do with whoever anyone else marries, whoever wants to present in a certain way, or do certain things the rest of us might not engage in, that's not hurting anyone else.
Right.
Some of that becomes a little complicated, sort of, when it comes to children. But generally, we need to respect generally parents' wishes. And I think that is something that everyone in America agrees on, but people do not agree where that line ends.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's a freedom issue. You have a freedom to parent, but children have agency as well.
Mhm.
We don't own them. And so what about the kids' freedom? Where does that line end? And so I think what we're seeing in Louisiana right now and lately is some of those questions that we're seeing nationally.
That's very interesting to put it. I can promise you something. I'm not going to wear my sequin dress in the house or on the bus.
It's just an example, with the birth
Oh, no,
control
but
debate.
I like it, and let me tell you something, it's one of the
Mhm.
reasons I love asking the question, because I love a unique answer, and that really is I love your answer. It's very unique, and it actually makes me think. It actually makes me go, "Okay, wow, wait a minute," "Now what about my freedoms?" And that's what I'll always tell people, like, I might not agree with a freedom that somebody else has, but I respect their freedom, their right to have that freedom. And at some point, if we all be more respect of each other's freedoms, and kind of don't wear our hat in a way that's knocking somebody out on the bus, then we're all able to live a happier life and live in a society that may work harder on solutions than on whose freedoms are more right than others. And I'm glad that you brought that about protecting the children, because I know the issues you're talking about, with the libraries right now. And I think it's really
Mhm.
important because in some arguments, especially on a national level, it's become ideological, and the kids are supposed to be the reason we're fighting for those issues, and they're weighing more heavily on ideologies instead of what needs to be protected, which is children. And if we focus on how to protect children, I think that we can be respectful of each other's freedoms in a way that the children get the protection that they need, and that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, the library issue is very strange to me because um, I wish more kids went to the library
Right.
nowadays.
Exactly.
I mean, I did all the time, and especially in the summer, but with computers and cell phones and everything available, I don't see it as something they even do enough
Mhm.
anymore. Although I know modern day libraries are trying to hold more events and bring the kids in to teach them one on one, which is super important, very, very important. And so to go through and say that some of these books are pornographic or something is bizarre to me. But also, if you're bringing your kids to the library, you should see what they're checking out.
Yeah.
Um, I think a worse issue is, what are they watching on YouTube?
Right. Exactly.
Are
Yeah.
you checking that out? Yeah. One of my neighbors was telling me she has a 5 and like an 8-year-old, and they like to watch. There's a few different shows or cartoons. I don't know any of this on YouTube, so it's free, and they really
Yeah.
like to watch these kiddie educational shows. But she's had to go through all this trouble to turn off certain ads because they were showing like really inappropriate ads on YouTube
Wow.
to these kids. But she watches them with the kids, so she was able to kind of figure out how to block them and do that. And I think that's similar to libraries, similar to having an iPhone. That if a kid has that access, they should have a parent who can step in every now and then to help them out.
Yeah, I like that. Like I said, if you can focus on how to protect the children,
Mhm.
and take the ideologies
Yeah.
out of it, then there's some things that can be set in place, and this, of course, this is too long of a discussion to have now, but you can have certain age requirements. Parents have to,
Mhm.
be there to check out a book or whatever the case may be, and that way, you're respecting, I guess, the First Amendment, but also
Mhm.
protecting children,
Yeah.
so. So it's
Yeah.
it's a fine it's a fine line, but that's a unique answer. I haven't had that one on the show yet.
I
Yeah.
mean, I do want more children to have supervision, and so they can ask questions when they don't understand something, and that they're not just telling each other. which
Yeah.
happens all the time. They tell each other how their bodies work or how sex works, and they're totally wrong,
Right.
and they end up hurting themselves. So having more access but structured, I think, is helpful to everyone. And a lot of the library issues should just be decided on a local level.
Yeah.
I mean, we really should not be deciding as a state or a country what's going on at your local library. Talk about getting too much in the weeds.
Well, and you just alluded to something that I think is important on this issue is parental involvement.
Mhm.
And if there could be some sort of legislation or even on a local level that requires more parental involvement, in the library system, not only protecting children, but we're putting
Mhm.
parents back, in the libraries,
Yeah.
with them in ways that helps everybody. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And it should be more local, and because those communities know how to reach parents, or they
Mhm.
know who's even using the
Right.
library, who's
They know
using.
who's going to them, and they know, you
They know
know
who's going,
yeah,
right. I mean, like the little tiny library I went to close by my house in Jefferson Parish growing up is very different than the New Orleans Library in St. Charles, that is enormous and has people from all over the city. So those are different communities.
love it. Well, Representative, is there anything else you wanna bring up before we close out, or anything else you wanna mention before I close out?
I think it's going to be kind of a wild session. We only have 2 months. Everyone wants to run home and campaign, so there's going to be, yeah, there's going to be a rush, but there's going to be
Right.
you're going to see a lot of speeches,
Yeah.
a lot of speeches that are
Oh,
going to show up in a lot of commercials.
speeches or grandstanding?
Well, it's in the eye of the beholder, I
Yeah.
guess. So we're going to see a lot of that on various issues, and I hope leadership can kind of put a, you know, little bit of, I wouldn't say a damper, but can control that a little. There's going to be a lot of insurance issues
Mhm.
because people are mad, rightly
Oh,
so.
yeah, absolutely, right.
Yeah, a lot. And I've been trying to help out on that a little bit. And it's super complicated because people feel like they've been misled and abused by their insurance companies, but the insurance companies are rightfully pointing to all the storms we have.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's going to be that. And I don't think we'll see the money fights like usual because we have money this year, which is
Yeah.
surprising. So I think it'll be an
We have money this year, but we're broke next year.
well, the half penny is rolling off when in 25. And I don't think outlook is terrible for next year, but we are still sitting on some extra cash right now, which is
Right.
shocking.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but we are. So that's my prognosis.
Well, let's hope they, do the right thing with the money this year so when we have, rainy days next year, the years after that, we have some money to dip into,
Yep. I hope
on
so.
that. Well, hang on one second. I wanna talk to you in a minute after I close out real quick, but I wanna thank everybody for listening. Representative Landry, I wanna thank you very much for not only being on my show, but also for sharing your legislation, but also for working so hard for your district and having the state on your mind and on your forethought. And everybody else, please share the interview. Of course, YouTube and Rumble, if you're watching it there, or it'll be on the podcast at all podcast apps at William Wallace for America. Thank you all so much and have a great day.
Thank you.